You grew up feeling like you had no skin, no emotional shield, no buffer between you and the world's chaos. Carl Jung discovered that children like you don't just survive this. They develop a terrifyingly acute set of psychological skills that can either save them or destroy them. And what he found will make your blood run cold. Jung called these children the unprotected, not because they were abused in the traditional sense, but because they were forced to absorb everyone else's unlived lives, the parents' repressed rage, the family's unspoken shame, the emotional weight of an entire household, all landing on shoulders too small to carry it. You weren't just a child, you were the family's shock absorber, processing feelings that didn't even belong to you. Consider a composite case profile that Jung's work illustrates perfectly. Picture a child growing up in a household where emotional expression is forbidden. The mother silently carries decades of resentment. The father buries his failures under forced cheerfulness. And there's this child, sitting at the dinner table, absorbing every unspoken tension, every fake smile, every carefully hidden crack in the facade. This child learns to read the room before they learn to read books. They become fluent in a language nobody else admits exists. Society looks at this and calls it trauma. They see damage. They see something broken that needs fixing. But Jung saw something completely different. He saw forced evolution. He discovered that when a child has no emotional protection, their brain rewires itself to survive. They develop what he called superpowers of perception, reading micro-expressions, sensing danger before it materializes, detecting lies in the smallest shift of someone's voice. You had to become psychologically advanced just to survive the living room. Think about it. While other kids were playing and being careless, you were studying. You were mapping your parents' moods like a meteorologist tracking storms. You knew exactly when to disappear, when to comfort, when to become invisible. You developed a psychological radar system that most adults never achieve in their entire lives. And you did it before you were 10 years old. Here's what makes this discovery so unsettling. The same neural pathways that save a child in a chaotic environment become prison bars in a stable one. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a genuinely dangerous situation and a safe one that just reminds you of danger. So it keeps scanning, it keeps protecting, it keeps running survival software even when there's nothing to survive. You're operating a threat detection system built for war in a time of peace, and it's exhausting. But here's where Jung's discovery becomes dangerous. These survival mechanisms that saved you as a child become reality distortions in adulthood. The same skills that protected you then now sabotage you. The hypervigilance that kept you safe now keeps you exhausted. The chameleon ability that helped you survive now makes you lose yourself. The emotional scanning that warned you of danger now overwhelms you with everyone else's pain. Jung realized that the unprotected child grows into an adult, carrying 7 specific traits. 7 dangerous psychological patterns that either destroy you through isolation and overwhelm, or transform you into something extraordinary once you understand them. These aren't just personality quirks. They're not just sensitivities. They're the aftermath of a childhood spent emotionally naked in a world that demands you feel everything while pretending to feel nothing. The first trait Jung identified is hypervigilant scanning. Your brain literally rewired itself to detect danger before it happens. While other people walk into a room and see furniture, you walk in and immediately scan every face, every micro-expression, every subtle shift in atmospheric tension. You know who's angry before they know it themselves. You can feel when someone's lying, even when their words sound perfectly convincing. You detect emotional earthquakes while they're still just tremors. This isn't paranoia. This is your nervous system operating at a level most people never access. Neuroscience now confirms what Jung observed, that childhood emotional neglect actually changes brain structure. Your amygdala, the fear center, becomes hyperactive. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, gets recruited into constant threat assessment. You're literally processing more emotional data per second than people who grew up protected. Let's look at a narrative illustration of how this plays out. Imagine walking into a workplace meeting. Everyone else sees colleagues sitting around a table, but you immediately notice the CFO's jaw is clenched. The marketing director is smiling, but her shoulders are rigid. Two team members won't make eye contact with each other. The room feels fine to everyone else, but you're drowning in unspoken tension that you can't ignore and nobody else can detect. Within 5 minutes, you've mapped the entire political landscape of conflicts that won't surface for another 3 weeks. But here's the danger. You can't turn it off. You're scanning even when you're safe. You're reading people even when you're trying to relax. You walk into a party and within minutes, you know who's faking their happiness, who's hiding their marriage problems, who's secretly jealous of whom. And this knowledge exhausts you because you can't unsee it. You can't unfeel it. You're carrying everyone's emotional truth whether you want to or not. The second trait is the chameleon reflex. You unconsciously shift your personality to match whoever's in front of you, becoming what they need you to be to stay safe. With angry people, you become calm and soothing. With sad people, you become comforting and strong. With narcissists, you become their perfect mirror. It happens so automatically, you don't even realize you're doing it. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Jung called this persona identification, when the mask you wear becomes so convincing that you forget your real face underneath. As a child, this saved your life. If you could become what your unstable parent needed, you could avoid their rage or their abandonment. If you could read what the room required and transform into that, you could survive another day. But now you're an adult, and you're still shape-shifting, still molding yourself to everyone else's needs, still disappearing into whatever form keeps the peace. We see this dynamic clearly in the pattern where someone becomes a completely different person depending on who they're with. With their boss, they're competent and assertive. With their partner, they're gentle and accommodating. With their parents, they're still the dutiful child. With friends, they're the entertainer. Each version feels real in the moment, but if you ask this person who they actually are when nobody's watching, they genuinely can't answer. They've been performing for so long that they've lost contact with any authentic core beneath the performances. The danger is losing your true self completely. You've been so many different people to so many different others that you genuinely don't know who you are when you're alone. You look in the mirror and see a stranger. You try to identify your own preferences and draw a blank. You've spent so long being everyone else's perfect companion that you've become nobody to yourself. The third trait is shadow absorption. You feel other people's repressed anger and sadness and think it's your own. Jung discovered what he called psychic infection, the phenomenon where unprotected empaths absorb the unconscious contents of everyone around them. You walk into a room feeling fine and leave feeling mysteriously depressed. You spend time with someone and suddenly you're carrying rage that doesn't belong to you. You're processing emotions that aren't yours, but feel completely real inside your body. This happens because as a child, you had to absorb your parents' unlived feelings to keep the family system stable. If mum couldn't express her grief, you felt it for her. If dad couldn't acknowledge his shame, it became yours to carry. You became the emotional landfill for an entire family's repressed content. And now, as an adult, you're still doing it. You're still unconsciously volunteering to carry other people's psychological waste. Consider a case profile based on patterns Jung consistently observed. Picture someone who spends an afternoon with a friend, who seems perfectly happy on the surface. They laugh, they joke, everything appears fine. But by evening, this person is inexplicably consumed by sadness they can't explain. They search their own life for reasons to feel this way and find nothing. What they don't realize is they've absorbed their friend's unprocessed grief about a loss the friend hasn't even acknowledged to themselves yet. The empath is feeling it first, processing it on behalf of someone who's still in denial. The danger is, you start believing these absorbed emotions are your own truth. You think you're depressed when you're actually carrying someone else's unprocessed sadness. You think you're anxious when you're feeling the collective tension of your workplace. You're drowning in feelings that don't even belong to you, and you're blaming yourself for not being able to manage them. The fourth trait is the savior complex. You have a compulsion to fix broken people because as a child, fixing the parent meant safety. If you could make mom happy, she wouldn't rage. If you could solve dad's problems, he wouldn't abandon you. Your survival depended on your ability to heal the unhealable, to save the unsavable, and that pattern is still running in your adult relationships. You're attracted to people who need saving, the addict who just needs one more chance, the narcissist who just needs someone to truly understand them, the emotionally unavailable person who just needs the right kind of love to finally open up. You see their potential instead of their reality. You see who they could become instead of who they actually are. And you sacrifice yourself trying to transform them into your vision. Let's examine a narrative illustration of this pattern. Imagine someone who repeatedly chooses partners with severe emotional problems. Each time, they believe this person is different. Each time, they invest everything into being the perfect supporter, the understanding partner, the one who finally loves them enough to inspire change. They ignore red flags. They make excuses for bad behavior. They convince themselves that if they just try harder, give more, love better, this broken person will finally heal. Years pass. The person doesn't change. And our subject moves on to the next fixer-upper relationship, never recognizing they're repeating the same childhood pattern where love meant being someone's unpaid therapist. The danger is you mistake this compulsion for love. You think you're being compassionate when you're actually repeating a childhood survival pattern. You're trying to finally succeed at saving someone the way you couldn't save your parent. But you can't heal someone who doesn't want to heal. You can't fix someone who isn't broken but is actually just showing you who they truly are, and you destroy yourself trying. The fifth trait is ruthless, interdependence. You have an inability to ask for help because help was never safe or available. As a child, showing vulnerability meant exploitation. Admitting you needed something meant being mocked or ignored. You learned that the only person you could rely on was yourself. So you built a fortress of self-sufficiency that nobody can penetrate. You do everything alone. You solve every problem yourself. You carry every burden without asking for support. People offer help, and you refuse it automatically. You'd rather suffer in silence than risk the vulnerability of needing someone. You've convinced yourself this is strength when it's actually just the scar tissue from a childhood where dependence equaled danger. We see this dynamic play out in scenarios where someone is drowning under impossible workloads, visibly struggling, clearly suffering. Yet when colleagues offer assistance, they immediately deflect with, "I've got it handled," or "I'm fine." They work themselves into burnout rather than accept help. They'd rather fail alone than succeed with support, because somewhere deep in their psychology, asking for help still triggers the terror of a child who learned that needing someone makes you weak, makes you a target, makes you vulnerable to abandonment or abuse. The danger is isolation. You've built walls so thick that even people who genuinely want to support you can't get through. You're suffering alone when you don't have to. You're carrying weight that could be shared. But you can't let anyone in because the child inside you still believes that needing someone is the most dangerous thing you could ever do. The sixth trait is the lie detector. You have an uncanny, almost supernatural ability to sense when someone's being inauthentic. You can feel the gap between what people say and what they mean. You detect the falseness in forced smiles. You sense the performance in calculated kindness. You see through social masks that everyone else accepts at face value. And this ability ruins casual relationships because you see too much. While everyone else is enjoying surface-level friendships, you're drowning in awareness of all the unspoken tensions and hidden agendas. You can't do small talk because you're simultaneously processing the 12 layers of meaning underneath the words. You can't pretend not to notice when someone's lying. You can't unsee the manipulation in seemingly innocent requests. Your perception is so differentiated that most human interaction feels like watching a play where you're the only one who knows everyone's reading scripts. Consider a composite example based on patterns Jung documented. Picture someone at a social gathering where everyone's having pleasant conversations. Someone mentions a mutual friend and expresses concern about them. Everyone else hears genuine worry. But our subject immediately detects the subtle glee underneath the concern, the performative nature of the care, the fact that this person is enjoying discussing someone else's problems while pretending to be sympathetic. Nobody else catches it. Our subject can't unhear it. They realize this entire friendship group operates on a foundation of polite backstabbing that everyone pretends doesn't exist. And suddenly, they can't participate in conversations that everyone else finds perfectly normal. The danger is loneliness. Most people can't handle being seen this clearly. They feel exposed around you, even when you're not saying anything. Your presence makes them uncomfortable because they sense you're seeing all the parts they're trying to hide. So they avoid you. They call you intense or too serious. They choose comfortable illusions over your uncomfortable truth. And you end up alone, not because you're broken, but because you're too aware. The seventh trait is the emotional dam. You have the ability to completely shut down emotions in a crisis, dissociating to function, followed by a delayed crash. When everyone else is panicking, you become unnaturally calm. When chaos erupts, you shift into pure function mode. You become the person who handles the emergency, who makes the decisions, who holds everyone together. Your emotions don't disappear. They just get locked behind a wall while you do what needs to be done. This is trauma response, masquerading as strength. As a child, you couldn't afford to feel your feelings when survival required action. So you learned to compartmentalize, to split yourself into the part that functions and the part that feels, the part that performs and the part that processes, and you became extraordinarily good at it. Let's look at a narrative illustration of this mechanism. Imagine a family emergency, a loved one rushed to the hospital. Everyone else is crying, panicking, falling apart, but one person remains completely calm. They make the phone calls, they handle the logistics, they comfort everyone else. They appear to be handling everything with remarkable composure. Days pass. The crisis resolves. Everyone else processes their fear and moves on. But 3 weeks later, this person suddenly collapses into uncontrollable sobbing for no apparent reason. They're confused by their own delayed reaction. What they don't understand is that they compartmentalized all their fear during the crisis. And now that it's safe, the dam is finally breaking. The danger is the crash that comes later. The emotions don't disappear, they accumulate. And when the crisis passes, when you're finally alone, the dam breaks. You collapse under the weight of all the feelings you couldn't afford to process in the moment. You experience delayed breakdowns that confuse everyone because they happen days or weeks after the actual event. And you start to believe something's wrong with you because your emotions operate on a different timeline than everyone else's. So what happens when the unprotected empath finally snaps? Jung documented what he called the shadow eruption. When these 7 traits remain unintegrated, when you don't understand them or learn to control them, you eventually reach a breaking point. The sensitivity that made you compassionate curdles into cruelty. The perception that helped you survive becomes the weapon you use to destroy. People who've never seen you angry suddenly witness rage they didn't know you contained. The person who's been absorbing everyone's pain for decades finally projects it all back with devastating accuracy. You know everyone's wounds because you've been scanning them your whole life. And when you snap, you know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. You become the very thing you've been protecting everyone from, the emotional devastation you've been holding back through sheer force of will. We see this pattern clearly in scenarios where the kindest person in the group suddenly delivers the most devastating verbal destruction anyone's ever witnessed. They don't just get angry, they surgically dismantle someone's entire identity using intimate knowledge they've been quietly collecting for years. Everyone's shocked because they've never seen this side before. But this capacity was always there, just suppressed under layers of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice. But Jung discovered there's another possibility: integration. You don't heal these traits by getting rid of them. You heal by learning to control them. You transform hypervigilance into strategic intuition. Instead of scanning everything all the time, you choose when to activate your perception and when to rest. You turn shadow absorption into conscious empathy. You learn to feel other people's emotions without believing they're yours. You recognize when you're carrying someone else's content and you consciously choose to put it down. You transform the chameleon reflex into conscious adaptation. You can still read what the room needs, but you choose whether to provide it based on your own values, not just automatic survival. You convert the savior complex into healthy boundaries. You can still care about broken people without believing it's your job to fix them. You shift ruthless independence into interdependence. You learn that asking for help isn't weakness but wisdom. You're strong enough to be vulnerable with people who've earned that trust. You evolve the lie detector into discernment. You still see when people are being inauthentic, but you don't let it drain you. You use it to make choices about who deserves your energy and who doesn't. You integrate the emotional dam into emotional regulation. You can still function in crisis, but you process feelings in real time instead of storing them for a delayed collapse. This is the journey from unconscious survival to conscious living, from being controlled by your traits to controlling them. You're not getting rid of your sensitivity. You're not becoming less perceptive. You're becoming the master of abilities that used to master you. Jung believed this was the difference between psychological destruction and psychological evolution, between staying the victim of your childhood and becoming the architect of your adulthood. You are not damaged goods. You are forged weapons that need a master, and that master is your own consciousness. Every trait that's made your life harder contains the seed of extraordinary power once you learn to wield it intentionally. The hypervigilance becomes intuitive wisdom. The chameleon becomes conscious versatility. The shadow absorption becomes healing presence. The savior complex becomes genuine service. The ruthless independence becomes authentic strength. The lie detector becomes protective discernment. The emotional dam becomes emotional mastery. But integration requires one thing most people never achieve: the courage to see yourself completely, to acknowledge that you contain both the wounded child and the emerging warrior, to accept that the same traits that made you suffer also made you extraordinary, to recognize that you're not too sensitive for this world. You're exactly what consciousness evolution requires once you stop apologizing for abilities that most people will never develop. Jung's own psychological work reflects this journey. His exploration of the unconscious wasn't just academic, it was personal. He understood the cost of overwhelming perception because he paid it himself. His work during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. He learned to integrate the very patterns he observed in others, transforming dangerous perception into psychological wisdom. This is your inheritance if you choose it. You can keep suffering unconsciously, under the weight of traits you don't understand, or you can integrate them consciously and become the person your childhood was preparing you to be. Not a victim, not broken, not too sensitive, but a conscious empath who knows how to protect their energy while using their gifts strategically. Someone who sees everything but chooses wisely what deserves their attention. Someone who feels deeply but maintains boundaries that keep them whole. The unprotected child you were had no choice, but the adult you're becoming has all the choice in the world. You can let these 7 traits control you, or you can master them. You can stay trapped in unconscious patterns, or you can transform them into conscious power. You are the protector now, not of everyone else, but of yourself first. And from that foundation of self-protection, you can choose who and what deserves the gift of your extraordinary perception. If you're ready to take control, comment below, "I am the protector now." If this resonated with your experience, hit that like button. Subscribe for more insights into the psychology that transforms suffering into strength. Because you're not here to stay broken, you're here to become whole. And that journey starts with understanding that everything you thought was wrong with you is actually right with you, once you learn to use it consciously. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.